5 reasons to engage in conflict. So this is a mindset piece, and it's like it's where starting with conflict is the most helpful. Like if we were going to do a 3-day intensive workshop right now, we would probably start with, okay, what's our current relationship with conflict, and how is our mindset impacting the way that we engage or not engage in conflict? And so we're going to talk about 5 different reasons and ways to embrace conflict further. And why are we even talking about this topic? And why would it be the first step in a 3-day intensive? It's because as humans, we do tend to avoid conflict. And we do tend to see conflict as something to minimize. I think whenever I have someone reach out to me, whether it's an individual or a team that's looking for help with making their lives easier, what they'll say is, I would like to find ways to make the conflict smaller or make the conflict go away. How can I set up my team so that we don't have conflict, like stuff like that, which is a flag for me and lets me know that they're doing what all of us tend to do, which is, see the conflict as a negative thing. So we're going to talk about that. Um, so anything else you want to say, Kareen, about like setting the tone for this conversation before I go into number one?
No, I think other than just to say, like, we're big fans of conflict, as long as you have the skills, that makes it so much easier. A skill set and a mindset and a bit of a process to follow, which is why we're so passionate about teaching this. We know how painful conflict can be, and we know how successful it can be if it's done well and received well.
Beautiful. So number one in the reasons to embrace conflict, avoiding it, which is what we were just talking about, humans tend to do, actually makes it bigger instead of smaller most of the time. And speaking as a recovering conflict avoider, I think the majority of mediators out there started as conflict avoiders, and then they felt they needed skills to better deal with life. And so they took the training and then they started mediating. Sometimes it's fine to just avoid it and hope it goes away. But man, when it's not fine, it's really not fine. Like I'm thinking about, I used to work in community disputes and I would mediate for like neighbors. And the stories they would come in with, like these 10-year stories. We've been living next to each other for years and years. And it all started when their dog started pooping on my lawn. And at first, I didn't say anything because I don't like to cause a mess. I don't like to start things. So I didn't say anything and I just cleaned it up, but it just kept happening. And then they start, instead of addressing the issue, there's passive aggressive tactics. And when people would come in, they would have like these feuds with them and their kids and their partners, and they would be shoveling snow onto the other person's sidewalk on purpose, and like uh raking leaves and like leaving it on top of other people's cars. Like it would ramp up and become from passive aggressive to just more aggressive, and people calling the cops on each other for really silly stuff that the cops don't need to be called for. And it all starts with, that first few instances where something comes up and it's not addressed, and then the stories just build. So it just makes it bigger, and it's just not worth it. The risk of it becoming so of so much time being spent and so much energy being spent in the long run is just is not worth it for how little time could be spent to address it when it's still small.
I'll just add that we can become sort of like story making little machines where we make meaning out of that slight that we perceive that someone made against us, and we make up these pretty involved stories. And they're very rarely true. In the 16 years of mediation, when I ask what those stories are with the folks beforehand, before the mediation, and then as we intentionally unpack that, it's rarely accurate. And it's rarely accurate because we only have like less than 50% of the story because we only have our side. And then we make up the other 50%, and it's like almost 100% wrong. 100% it's inaccurate, or just a bad guess. And we often guess towards the negative, and it's rarely hitting the mark. And so let's try to get it straight right from the get-go. It's quite delightful when you start to unpack them and realize how just off the mark and how totally convinced that they were right.
And we get to see that as mediators because we hear the individual stories. And how often, Karina, are you thinking if these people just got in the same room together and said these things, so much would be resolved just from the information sharing about what each of the stories is.
Truly.
So, okay, that's the first one. Avoidance makes it bigger. The second reason to embrace conflict is that conflict is actually so useful. It's a signal. If we can think instead about conflict as a problem and more that it's a really informative signal that something is coming up, then we can use it. We can like use it as a jumping off point to get to better things.
It's kind of insightful. I find conflict is like a laser insight, like you said, that something's up, something's wrong, and something needs to be addressed. And especially like I use anger as well as a very like insightful kind of experience. If I can move through like how it makes me want to like kick and scream, but what is it about that needs to get paid attention to? There is a flash, something is urgent, and it needs to be looked at because there's something really important at play. And if we can see it that way, as a point of inspired wisdom versus a thing that's going to be a hard detraction, and we move toward it with curiosity and non-judgment of like, let's find out what this is about. And when you have some tools, one, to identify it in yourself and in others, and then two, to be able to use sort of neutral language to be like, something's up here. What's going on? Or things like, I'm feeling defensive and I'm not quite sure why. Or something just seems off in this conversation. I can't put my finger on it. Can we talk about it? As opposed to like, there's a conflict here and we need to get to the root of the matter and find out who's right and who's wrong. It's probably me that's right, and we're just going to find out how you're wrong. Like if we can stay away from that and move into like, what is this about? Like something's weird here. We don't usually have this kind of discord. Can we kind of take a second and figure it out? Um, and what I would say is that it's efficient. Like if you can find it in the moment and talk about it, this is maybe like a signal that something is up. It can create efficiencies versus an unresolved conflict that is can, like Ali was saying with the previous example, can take us off track for a long time. And it can be quite efficient to just dial in and be like, what happened between yesterday's conversation and today's conversation? What happened? It can be fast and helpful.
It can be scary in the moment to do that, like digging in, especially when it's proactive and especially when we think I have the option. If I could just do nothing here. It's so tempting.
It helps to have a know that you're going to be well received, like to have some trust with the people that you're with. So that definitely takes the risk down, but yeah, it doesn't take it away.
Yeah, that's a great point. And often one of the things that gets in the way of having the conversation is the trust is low. We don't trust it's going to be well received, and or we have a story that the trust that they are the bad guy, probably because we waited and they became the bad guy in our heads, and then we just are convinced that they wouldn't be able to hear us or whatever. And so there's a lot of internal work to do to open ourselves up to the possibility that it could actually go really well, and then throw out one little seed of kindly, clearly working to address. And if it is well received, then more and more and more, until we're able to rebuild that trust. So that second one was conflict is a signal. So instead of the flag goes up and we run away from the flag, try to see what's on the flag that just popped up. See if you can identify what is this conflict trying to tell you is happening. The third one is conflict being an opportunity to learn. And for those of us who want to grow and are looking for opportunities to become better at engaging in the world, or we want better relationships, but we're not really sure how to do that, this is it. This is conflict is the place to go to figure out how can I learn more about myself? How can I learn more about the other people in my life? And how can I learn more about situations like this? Like if we're finding that we keep, I don't know what's going on with me, but I just keep getting into situations. Life keeps throwing these situations at me that are just so crazy. And I don't know, I'm just going to move on. And then again, a similar situation. I just keep meeting these crazy people and, it has nothing to do with me. Just these crazy people are just stumbling along in my path. But if instead we lean into that and figure out, okay, what is this a signal of, like number two, and what can I learn about myself? And what can I learn about these types of people in this situation? And then we're more informed and wiser the next time this comes up. And then the situation can be different because we are a different version of ourselves the next time around.
I'm the last one to talk about this and the first one to talk about this. Like, um, how excited I get about how much we can learn about ourselves through like frustrated values. Like a conflict comes up because one of our values has been compromised, stepped on, frustrated, jammed up, whatever. And the more that we can use that as a great way to dial in and be like, regardless of what outcome comes of this, if this is a good solution or a bad solution, I needed to know that this was an important value that was getting stepped on. It was really important to me. It's something that I didn't realize maybe is really important to me. And I needed to know that because it helps round out maybe some other conversations. Where does this value that's being stepped on so clearly in this situation, where does it act up in other ones, or where is it satisfied? Why is this the only time I've sort of come up across this value? Where is it being so well satisfied? And that alone is a huge win to be able to understand more about yourself and what motivates you. And that takes us to the next piece around vulnerability brings connection. So Brene Brown, I was just telling Ali earlier that I've been sort of diving into some of her podcasts right now. And she's just got a really great way of talking about how that conflict and the vulnerability that is established during conflict actually, when it's handled well and in a healthy way and it has a resolution, even if that resolution is just with yourself, maybe that solution doesn't come up with the other person. Maybe they didn't realize what an idiot they are and change their ways and put things back on track. But even getting vulnerable with ourselves can be a really important connection with ourselves and with others, or with the conflict or the situation. That sort of context of the conflict can actually help us evolve, learn, move forward together in a way that just wasn't there prior to the conflict happening. What do you think, Ali?
I am thinking about a situation that happened to me a couple years ago where a friend she did such a brave thing. We were hanging out on vacation and something that I was doing was really getting to her. And she could have done what most people do, which is decide in her mind, I don't think I should go on vacations with this person anymore. Or maybe we're not as good of friends as I thought we were. Um, or she could have like made reasons to not hang out with me as much while we're on vacation. But instead she was like, okay, I need to talk to you about something. And I haven't fully baked it in my mind, but here it is. And she made it all about her. And she let me know that um, the way that I was showing up in like social situations, just to give you context, I love hanging out with her so much. And I get so excited about how I feel when her and I get to hang out that I like over talk. I like over engage. And so she's like, when we're hanging out in groups, like I feel like I'm getting smaller because your excitement is so big. And so we had a chance to talk about that, and she was so vulnerable and so honest about what her experience was, and there was no blaming in it. She was just explaining what the impact of the situation was on her. And I never felt triggered. I didn't feel defensive. I felt so honored to be hanging out with someone who was willing to go there and talk about a tricky thing that she did not have to get into. Like, it's not like her and I are married and we have to hang out with each other every day. You know, it's an with a friendship, it's an optional thing. And the fact that she chose to do that, by the end of the vacation, we were on the same page. We were so much closer, and we referenced that conversation. It's not now something to be avoided. Oh, that awkward time in our relationship. It's like, no, remember that time when we like leveled up in our friendship and now we're closer and more bonded than we were. And I'm so grateful that we had that conversation because now we interact with each other differently. And um, yeah, that I actually haven't had many more now, but I haven't had many instances of someone else being willing to meet me in that level of vulnerability to have a tough conversation. And so I was so grateful, and it's sort of raised my expectations, I think, for what I would like to see from the people that I hang out with, because I know it's possible, and I know that it's going to make, as long as both people are willing to go there, it's going to make the relationship and the connection stronger instead of more precarious.
That's beautiful. What a great example. And it's so important and sort of comes back to that point of like, you have to have some trust and some skin in the game to be willing to kind of walk down this road, but it's so worth it. Some of the other reasons that we had, just to highlight them real quick, um, talking about how avoiding conflict makes it bigger, how conflict can be a signal that something is up that needs to be addressed, that can be really insightful and helpful. And then conflict is an opportunity to learn. And then this last one, vulnerability brings connection. And the last one is that without conflict, life would be boring. I can't even imagine how, and it would be terrible too. Like you said, it's a, it's a power up. It's a level up when it's done really well. And this relates to inner conflict as well. Like if we're not moving this gaze inside as well to say like, I'm conflicted, but where's the conflict inside myself to understand why I'm upset, where this upset is coming from, which of my values is being compromised, frustrated, jammed up. How am I contributing to that? What am I doing in particular? What are my expectations for my behavior around standing up for this value or advocating or satisfying this value? As well as what are the expectations that I can share or some of the story or some of the questions that I can ask that other person about the conflict as well. Like it's a really, when you embrace conflict with curiosity and non-judgment, it can be such a rich and exciting, if you can take it down the threat level, depending on what the conflict is, it can be so exciting.
Mhm. Yeah, I think we think about people who have been through a lot of conflict as people to feel sorry for or to pity, especially depending on the impact of it. But I actually think, like, think of a person who was born and had no conflict, knew exactly what their plan was in life, never had anything bump up against their beliefs, and they just coasted and coasted. I feel bad for that
My
trajectory.
immediate response was like, oh, those poor people.
Because no growth, right? No need to grow. And it results in a one-dimensional character and quite low resilience. And so this is by no means advocating like going into traumatizing situations on purpose to grow. But a healthy level of conflict consistently in our lives we rise to the occasion and we become more dynamic and we become more interesting and we become more capable and adaptable. And then our lives become amazing. Because if we truly believe that conflict is a signal, we're walking along in our lives, and then a signal comes up, maybe it's internally in us that says, oh, I used to love my job, but now I'm getting a signal that something has changed. And maybe it's an emotion that comes up when we're at work and we're noticing it and we're noticing it. And okay, so consistently for the last few months being at work, I've felt disinterested or apathetic or frustrated or whatever it is. What is that telling me? And if we're actually paying attention to those signals, we might decide a change is needed. And the change, hopefully, will be more in line with things that fulfill us and things that satisfy our values, things that give us meaning. If we're shut off to those signals, we'll just become numb and we'll just stay and stay and stay. And life will lose its color. And we'll just kind of be okay with that because we won't know there's another option. But practicing getting to know those signals, those conflict signals, and embracing them can transition something that is initially scary. And it's totally fine to have anxiety when there's something that looks like a conflict situation come up. But reframing ourselves in from anxiety into excitement and into a hopeful place of where could I go with this? As the ultimate decision maker in my life, I could have this go in so many directions, and which one am I going to choose? That's an exciting place to be, and it results in a really fulfilling lifestyle. So, what questions, what comments, anything anybody wants to say about these five factors around embracing conflict? Again, number one, avoidance, not a good idea. It just makes it bigger. Number two, conflict is actually a signal that something is going on and needs to be paid attention to. Number three, it's an opportunity to learn about ourselves, other people in the situation. Number four, it encourages vulnerability, which brings connection. And number five, life would just be too damn boring without a little bit of conflict in it.
Yeah, I want to mention the correlation between conflict and authenticity. Myself growing up, um, I had a very emotionally neglectful childhood, and it was very painful because, I had all these emotions and I didn't have a parents that I could really talk with about that, and I struggled and I suppressed myself for years. So what happened is I grew up really not knowing much about who I am until adult life, but that suppression was being intimidated. I was adopted. I didn't know my father, so I had another man raising me, and I felt intimidated around him for a good part of my childhood. So what I did is I naturally internalized a lot of my emotions and suppressed myself, and I didn't deal with that uncomfortableness of being able to speak, and he didn't encourage it either. So I didn't have that attachment figure where I could speak with. And now looking back, in suppressing myself like that and avoiding, conflict, and basically suppressing my individuality, I just see how important it is to speak up. And, regardless if you're embarrassed or ashamed of how you feel or anything like that, it's not about them. It's about you and, coming into your own. And I believe confrontation is a great catalyst for that, because we have to be vulnerable. I mean, you know what I mean? And getting over that stigma that vulnerability is a weakness. I don't know as a again, I don't know, as a male growing up, there's a lot of that pressure that's a weakness. It's not. Vulnerability is completely the catalyst of growth. And there's a quote that I just recently saw somebody saying, "You have to be a fool before you become a master." And I wasn't willing to be a fool. I wasn't willing. I was embarrassed to say, "Okay, this is how I felt," you know, as a child, and as I got into my teenage years, and I had more and more new emotions. I was embarrassed about. First of all, I didn't have really a healthy outlet to express them with anybody. But regardless, I don't know if I would have, because I internalized everything. And um, I'm just learning now as an adult how beneficial confrontation is. So this is an amazing subject, and I'm so glad to be a part of it. So
That is awesome. Just out of curiosity, was there one thing that changed where you were like, so you're like, this was who I was, and now you've got this really like, I embrace conflict, I embrace confrontation. What was the switch? Was there like a pivotal moment or some realization?
to be honest, I lost my job. So I was working in an industry for a long time. Um, um, I was good at it, but I wasn't always the happiest, and it wasn't always the best I felt for me emotionally. I was working 7 nights a week. Um, so I really started reflecting and doing a lot of self-awareness about like who I am and what I want to do in the future. And, um, and it really came back down to, I've been doing a lot of inner child work right now, just on a side note. So I've been really coming down to just like finding out who I am, and, that I did have quite a abusive childhood. Um, so, um, the main thing that has really hurt me, other than without having an outlet where I could express myself and learn, was suppression and suppressing who I am and internalizing who I am, because I didn't have anybody that I could talk with growing up as a child and into my teenage years. And I kind of stumbled into this industry, and yes, I was good at it because I was a perfectionist. I was trying to make up for, not being happy inside, and trying to please my boss and please all this. And then eventually I just lost my job, and to me that was the end. I was like, oh my, like, who am I identified with my job, like, you know what I mean, like, who am I now? I'm unemployed, and like I don't know who the hell I am. Excuse my language. I don't know who I am. And like, so it's like, then I realized this is a major detriment. Like, I'm not whole. So, then I discovered inner child work, and I discovered that confrontation was a huge thing, because I was physically intimidated by, this man that was raising me most of my life. And he was an emotional bankrupt guy, like an emotionally bankrupt guy. He didn't encourage talking about emotions, wasn't there, you know, and my mother herself had, couldn't manage her emotions a lot. So I realized that, confrontation is me. It's being a unique me, not meaning like I'm gonna jump a confrontation. What I meant is like, what I was suppressing was really my individuality and who I am most of my life. And so I realized that I really didn't have values. I really didn't have, there's a lot of stuff I wasn't learning. I really didn't know who I was, because I identified with my job for so many years. And, it might sound pretty dark, but to me, it was a big learning curve, and it was it's really helped me grow quite a bit. And so I'm just doing everything from like the basis, the foundation, learning my values again, learning, you know, and I just, confrontation is a good thing. It's not a negative word to me. It's really about expressing myself, because if I don't express myself, regardless of their reaction, I can't control their reaction. Like, someone's going to get angry if I say something that disagrees with them. Well, that's on them. That's not on me. But I've expressed myself, and I'm being who I am, authentically me. So I know I'm kind of going on a tangent right now, but all this is very new to me, so it's really exciting.
I can't
So
believe that this is new to you. This is like you are articulating yourself really, really well, that this is a new adventure that you're on. One, yay. So exciting. Congratulations.
thank you.
And
Yeah,
two, you are really landing the why and the what and the how really well. I'm really impressed. I know Gavin and I also have gone through job loss, getting laid off. So, right, it's a mind fuck the way it like. Pardon my, no, I don't. I'm not looking for pardons. It messes with your self identity and your self concept. And I have been on this journey for a real long time, and it's still like set my boat adrift in the water there for a minute, where I'm like, who am I, and what do I even know about myself? This was a really important space. What I had done previously to realign quicker than I would have in the past, I'm sure. But man, those kinds of things, um, like they throw you off in a real big way there. Yeah.
100%. Yeah. Yeah, especially
Yeah.
if you have a title, right? You have a title and it's like this is who I am, right? Like I'm a manager of this or I'm a, and
Yes.
you're depended on and then suddenly you're not depended on if you lose your job or through various circumstances and it's just
Yeah.
yeah, it's a thin line. It's a thin line, but you have to be more than that. You have to be more than your job, right?
Right. And then when you re-employ or when you're employed, like that has to be important and give you some concept. But you're right, not the whole concept. I watched my mom. She was a nurse in like leadership positions, and she had to retire early for health reasons. And I watched her lose her goddamn mind, to be honest, because it was a sudden retirement and it came with this like helplessness around the health issues, but she never regained her sense of self. And that was like a fascinating experience to watch. Not the most emotionally regulated woman at the best of times. Let's just be honest. But I watched her become completely unglued and never really was able to put that back. And I was watching that as a young woman saying, like, that's not going to be me. That's not going to be how I stitch my identity around that. And it happened to me as well, where I was like, oh no, shit, I drank the Kool-Aid. I did the thing. Luckily, I had also done these other pieces of work as well.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, something that I love that there's like a honing in on authenticity here because by definition, in order to be authentic, it means we're going to be different than what other people are. And we're going to need different things than what other people need. And that's going to create conflict. We cannot be our authentic selves and walk around expecting that everyone's just going to be totally fine with that all the time. And man, is that ever confronting? There are so many times getting to know myself, still, like having been a mediator for 10 years, I'm still walking around in the world and needing to remind myself, okay, Allie, you could accommodate here with your group of friends, people that I love, I could accommodate here, but then I would be prioritizing the needs of my friends over my own needs. And the needs of my friends are very important. It is very important to me that my friends' needs get met, but it shouldn't be more important than my needs getting met. And I'm not talking about wants, I'm talking about needs, like, health and like being a more sensitive person. I usually leave the party, as one of the earlier people, that sort of thing. And I have this like real conflict in those moments internally, usually only internally, sometimes externally if I let it go longer, where my authentic self loves to go to bed early and like cuddle my cat and like do the grandma thing. Um, but I know that if I ignored those needs around health and around rest and around peace, then I would be tantalized by these other needs like belonging and like validation and um, connection and then I would feel so good too to when my friend says, are you coming to the next thing or are you gonna go out? And I'm just like, I know you want me to say yes and I want you to be happy so bad. But and it's such a small, like it's so low risk, those situations. Um and those are the ones that really, really matter because one little low risk situation, it's like death by a thousand cuts in those little moments where we can talk ourselves out of doing the thing and saying the thing that's authentically for us. Oh, it's not that big of a deal. It's, I'll just undermine my own needs this one little time. Those are the ones that get us over time. And one little moment messages to our psyches, oh, you didn't choose yourself. In that one little moment, you're you're telling yourself that you are not to be trusted to choose your needs first. And so those things, it becomes easier every time. But inversely, if we do choose ourselves and we do the scary thing, um, even if it feels, even if it is low risk, it can still feel really scary doing that. It's like an exponential growth moment. And we suddenly think, oh, I did it and it was fine. Like Karine was saying, it's like in a situation where we feel like our expressing our needs is going to be received, which it sounds like, Patrick, you're doing a bit of reassessing in your past. Maybe you didn't have folks that were able to receive that, but hopefully now you're able
Mhm.
to surround yourself with at least a couple people who you can trust will receive you when you are expressing yourself. That is such a transformative experience. And even though our past doesn't totally go away, we do get to overlay it with new experiences and more and more and more until we almost don't even really feel the impact anymore of those older experiences over time. And so that's such a, yeah, a useful, I think, orientation that you have to be focusing on authenticity when it comes to conflict. I just love that.
I'm trying. Thank you. I appreciate it. I appreciate that support. I'm trying. I mean, there's there's been some relationship building now with new people, and
I
distancing away from certain other people. And a lot of my relationships in my past were based on uh, like my work. My work was a very social kind of work, so I met a lot of relationships through that. And that's no longer the interests, common interests that we had. Unfortunately, are not the core are not there anymore because I'm not working. And well, what kind of relationship is that? So there's a lot of new development. So it's a journey. I treat it as that now because I mean I feel like we all life is a growing journey anyways. And if I have to be a better version of myself, and then I'm going to be meeting new people anyways. But hopefully these relationships are a little bit more long lasting and maybe more durable and genuine, maybe for lack of a better word. So yeah, it's a journey. It's regardless. I mean, I like who I'm becoming. So I mean, that's a big thing. I realized that there was that void there, and I'm learning more about myself. So I know that I trust that I will gravitate, or people will gravitate more to me on my journey now, as I grow. So
And Patrick, you can say no or say you want to think about it, but is there anything that you are kind of like dealing with right now or coming up against, or any like barriers coming up as you're working through the journey that you want to throw out there since we're all chatting together?
honestly, I sometimes I'm a little hard on myself. Like I feel like I'm a little bit of a perfectionist. But really, I guess it's my sometimes my I think I'm too lazy. Like my like I can sit and watch TV or something like that. I have that core addiction to just comfort and ease, and it's like I'm not where I want to be right now. It's like, so no, you need to keep progressing. But then I can sit and just like watch TV and and like order Uber Eats and just relax. I know that sounds like a small thing, but it's actually, for me, I can just get lost in it and like just like, taking care of whatever you want to call yourself. I think it's a little bit excessive self-care because it's like, yeah, I'm not where I want to be right now. I want to be better than where I am. And, this self-discovery is kind of just brand new to me, and like self-improvement. So it's like, why am I doing these old habits of just sitting in front of the TV and watching other people's lives? You know what I mean? Does that make sense? It's an addiction of mine, I guess. Just my ease, my comfort and ease, Like leisure time is something that's like, yeah, it just robs me of like useful time a lot of times. And it's just like I just want to like I want to have discipline over that.
Yeah, I love that you're bringing this up, and it's so relatable. The amount of times that we have talked about comfort as a value and how comfort is important to all of us, and it can run the show sometimes. And it doesn't mean we're lazy, actually. It doesn't mean that there's something that's wrong. It means there's something that the value of comfort is trying to tell us. Again, this signal. And how come it's coming up? I actually have um we use the term at VBL called shadow values. And a shadow value is when something is sort of like underperforming or overperforming. And so for me, comfort overperforms. It tries to run the show. And it's been really interesting for me to get to know that. And I love that you're honing in on perfectionism too, because I think that's a factor here, right? Like when our values aren't performing the way that we want them to, we think, God, I really wish that I could do this better, and I'm not doing this as well as I want. And there's a reframing there around instead, okay, this value of comfort is actually trying to tell me something here. And it will be work for you to figure out what it's trying to tell you. But I'll just say for me, a lot of times when my value of comfort is yelling at me to whatever it is, like zone out with TV or scrolling or just like not interacting with the world and cuddling up like a burrito, whatever it is, um, it's usually because I'm overstimulated and there's something going on, because I too am really good at suppressing my emotions. And I really believe, like, I will really believe that I'm good. Like, no, I'm easygoing. I got nothing. But then little things will spurt out, like little signals will come out that'll tell me, like anger, spontaneous anger will come out, and I'll be like, whoa, that's not actually appropriate for the situation. So what is that about? Or suddenly I will just want to zone out. Maybe something happened earlier in the week that I didn't really acknowledge as bothering me because I told myself that's not really a big deal. I shouldn't be upset about that, but I was, and I didn't admit it. And so now later in the week, I'm scrolling on my phone for hours because I don't want to know the
Yeah.
thing that's trying to be known.
Yeah.
And so in that way, yeah, comfort is something that we're doing to help ourselves, right? It's trying to help us. It's popping up and trying to make us feel okay. And it again, it's a way for us to not keep ourselves from having comfort. We are supposed to have comfort in our lives. And it's about putting it in a place that is healthy and allowing ourselves to have comfort so that that comfort value isn't trying to take over, and it will make room for the other things that we also want to do that, for example, you're saying are really important to you and you want to carve out time for as well.
100%. Yeah. When you said that it's maybe you're overwhelmed, that's probably it. I use it, I use it as basically just like, yeah, okay, it's kind of a distraction, but at the same time, it could be because I'm exhausted mentally, or so yeah, 100%. I didn't think of that. That's a great point. Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, you bet. Kareen, what do you want to say about this? I mean, Kareen, this is my take on how this has been for me, but Kareen is the one who mentored me. So give us the bigger picture here.
No, I obviously I did a good job. Nailed it. I actually want to ask Gavin if he wanted to add anything there too. Because I know you've got some insights in these same kind of spaces that you're also moving through in a really powerful way.
Yeah, I'm part of a meetup group, and I chair the board meetings of that, and um, I'm quite interested in the engineer in me bring order out of apparent chaos, and I like that part of the people that we have a whole group of people that are trying to deal with conflict right now, and they're all trying to deal with it by being agreeable, and they're not you know, they agreed to something, and then behind the scenes and afterwards, it was kind of like, no, I should have, I didn't like this part, or I should have said that. I mean, I'm okay with it generally, but this, and I'm talking with them individually, and I think I've probably got plans to talk with at least half of the board on this. So it's just kind of like, yeah, we need to be able to deal with conflict um, much more productively, and not be so afraid of it. So monthly Q&A has been very timely here. It also reminds me of it was, I forget what this was, but it was an interview with a filmmaker or filmmaking school, and they said that no one's going to watch a movie if there's no conflict in it. It's not interesting. So when you said the life would be boring, it's kind of like that click to it finally. And it was just okay, like if my life story has no conflict, like what have I got at the end of it? Versus, yes, here's the things, and I might have gotten beat down and smacked around, and partial victories, or victories that didn't seem like it at the time, or I grew in unexpected directions because of it, which I think is part of that. So yes, a bit more confidence for a lifelong conflict avoider. So thank you. And thank you, Patrick. That's very inspirational to you as well.
Oh, thank you.
I love it. Yeah, I think we're all probably on that conflict avoiding spectrum. And I just wanted to lay down two things. One, I know also perfectionism is mm, a shield, a defensive shield. And so I know like you're in that moment of like more on the other side, and you're like, hey, where'd my perfectionism go? But there's something there about how that's used as a shield that can be explored in an interesting way as well, to be what is it insulating you from the critique, the judgment, the whatever. We actually did a podcast on this one a while back where it was like hitting me square between the eyes a couple too many times, and I'm like, I think there's something here for me to pay attention to. And just to say, like, where am I trying to like insulate myself from being judged, and then finding that I was being judged anyway. I was like, man, like the amount of effort and interest and time that I spent into trying to be perfect, only to have that thing that I was afraid of happen anyway. I mean, like, well, fuck. What was the point of all of that? And what was the intent even behind that? That sort of shadowy, like, um, hiding from something that was pointless, and would have been much better served to just embrace the lack of perfection, or just embrace the fear of being judged, and just let it happen and not try to control or manipulate that situation.
Vulnerability has been such a blessing because it's like people can even sense sometimes what you can't sense, right? Like if you're putting up a shield and a protection and not being yourself and being inauthentic, other people can sense that too, right? If they're really, if they know you, then they can sense that kind of thing. So
Yeah.
it's really just embarrassing. You're embarrassing yourself. I mean, it's a learning process, but you're embarrassing yourself because you really just need to let down that shield and be yourself. Because at the end of the day, when you realize you do that, generally everybody else is like that as well, and they all have their insecurities in vulnerabilities. And I didn't understand that. That's how far back. I'm not trying to put myself down. I'm not, but like that's how I'm just learning this now. Like I didn't understand that. Like I didn't have to be perfect. You know what I mean? And like I didn't have to have this huge ego, and my ego was really this big defense mechanism. Because I didn't want people to see like the real me. And it's like that's a whole topic in itself. But that's what I'm learning. So vulnerability and facing confrontation. I mean, to me, they go hand in hand. Um, because facing confrontation is facing my fears and facing what other people maybe think about me or other people's reactions, you name it. So or
I
myself
love
looking like
it.
myself looking like an idiot, like because I don't know this. You know what I mean? It's like, who cares? Be
Yeah.
yourself at the end of the day.
Well, and also you become more relatable and more likable.
Exactly.
So all of a sudden someone's like, "Oh, me too." I'm glad you said it because I was thinking it really loud.
Exactly.
And now you've got a friend in solidarity as opposed to an acquaintance in I don't even know the parallel to that, but like a equally protected acquaintance, that there's nothing interesting going on there.
No.
The other thing I wanted to add was there's where this embracing the combative, or like that conflict or the confrontation. I don't mean combative. I meant, what was the other word I used? Confrontation. There's another one in there around assertiveness that I'm actually a really big fan of, and it's actually a really tricky space to negotiate, but it's really grounded in values where it can be feeling like you're confronting, but it's actually like I'm just being solid here. I'm just assertively stating what I need or what I think or what I value, or here's what my standards are, here's my expectations of other people. And that can feel really confrontational, but it's actually more assertive, and leaving space for other people as opposed to helping them feel defensive with your statement. And it actually can be a really positive space, and it actually sounds more in line with where you're at. So I just wanted to give you a different vocabulary for maybe what you're exploring there. Yeah, we have a course on that one too, in the internal conflict.
You're right.
Yeah.
So we have 3 minutes left. I did, as you were talking, I did a bit of digging to try to find that perfectionism episode, Karina, the podcast, and it's actually in our Patreon vault. But because I'm the boss of that, I found the link to it, and so I just put that in the chat because normally it's like a membership thing, Patrick. But if you are interested, you can use the link that's in the chat to just go right to that video where we talk about perfectionism specifically as a tool that keeps us safe, and how why we actually revert to perfectionism as a way to keep us safe. And so feel free to watch that or not, but just know the link is there.
For sure. Thank you. I will.
Yeah.
Definitely. I enjoyed this. I'd like to be back again, maybe, and join you girls and do this again sometime. So
We
Please
love that.
do. Every
Yeah.
month we have a different topic, and we also meet for monthly circles too, which are a different way of, we pick a different value. For example, comfort or belonging or connection. We'll pick a different value and really like dig down in exploring our relationship with that value. So you're welcome to come to that as well. It's all on our website. But otherwise, any final thoughts or comments before we close for the day? I'm so glad you came, and thank you for sharing and being willing to let us fill us in a little bit about your life journey. I really appreciate it. And other people are going to listen to that and be inspired and act where they may not have felt comfortable acting before. So thank you for being willing to do that. I think that'll make an impact on the world.
yeah, thanks for doing these meetings. I mean, this is awesome. This is a blessing to people, and like myself, that this is all brand new too. So you know, I feel like I can just soak up all this knowledge that you guys teach and everything else. So like I said, I'm on YouTube a lot, so I'm just using YouTube a lot for self improvement and stuff. So when I discovered your guys group, I said, yeah, this is great. This is something I'm learning about value. So this is great. So caught my
Amazing.
attention. Thank you.
Well, thanks everybody. Enjoy the rest of your day and hope to see you again next time.